Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sake Revolution. This is America's first sake podcast, and I'm your host, John Puma from the Sake Notes, also the administrator over at the Internet Sake Discord, as well as Reddit's r/sake community.
And I'm your host, Timothy Sullivan. I'm a sake samurai, I'm a sake educator, as well as the founder of the Urban Sake website. And every week, John and I will be here tasting and chatting about all things sake, and doing our best to make it fun and easy to understand.
Tim, how have you been?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Not bad. I am, I'm kind of getting things a little organized in my life, getting things set up. The season's changing. Did you notice that, we kind of skipped fall?
I had a good amount of fall. There were a few days.
A week and a half. It got real cold real fast.
I had some sweater weather in there.
Well, sweater weather continues through winter, I think, right? But it's a sweater with a coat over it.
Yeah. So what are we going to be talking about on the podcast today?
Well, today we are going to take a dip into...
Dip our toe?
We're going to dip our toe into one of our sake prefectures. One of my favorite sake prefectures, I think. They're definitely on the short list for me.
Does it begin with a Y?
It does. Oh, no, guys. We're not doing Yamagata. Not today.
Wah,
No,
wah.
we're talking about the other Y. Yamanashi. No, wait a minute. No, the other Y, Yamaguchi.
Yamaguchi.
I think Yamaguchi a little bit of a dark horse. You got a lot of great stuff that comes from there, and not a lot of people think Yamaguchi when they probably should be.
Yes, more people need to think Yamaguchi when they think sake. Now, John, do you know where? If we're looking at Japan, do you know where Yamaguchi is located?
Yes. The Yamaguchi is just west of Hiroshima.
Right. So if you look at the Honshu Island, which is the main island of Japan, and it's kind of curved like a croissant shape, the far left corner, far to the west, basically the western tip of Honshu Island is where Yamaguchi is located. It's not too far from Hiroshima, right?
Right. Yeah, if you're taking like a Shinkansen from Fukuoka or to Fukuoka, it's gonna be like Hiroshima, Yamaguchi, and then Fukuoka.
It's on the far west of Honshu Island, and it's a really beautiful region of Japan. Have you been to Yamaguchi before?
I've taken a train through it twice.
Okay.
That's about it. I'd actually never stopped and spent any time there, and I really should. It's on my list of sake sins that I need to atone for.
Well, I've spent a little bit of time there. In 2011, I spent about a little over a month in Yamaguchi, and it was in the winter time, so it was colder than I thought, and I didn't know how much snow I was going to get, but it did actually snow while I was there. Very different levels of snow from my time spent in Niigata, which is in the Japanese Alps, and it was very, very mountainous. But where I lived in Yamaguchi was, it got very cold, but it didn't snow as much. Yamaguchi is famous for a few things, and one of them is some of their culinary items are very, very famous. And do you know what the most famous seafood is from Yamaguchi?
I couldn't tell you. Honestly, for me, Yamaguchi, literally the only thing I know about Yamaguchi is the sake. So enlighten me. I want to know.
Okay. Have you ever heard of Fugu? Fugu?
It sounds familiar. That is, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sure somebody will email us to do so if I am. That's the blowfish, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, you got it. Aha! It's the quote unquote poisonous blowfish.
Wait, quote unquote.
Yeah. I think that the blowfish, and again, our listeners can write in who know better, but I think the blowfish that are wild, like if you catch a fugu, a blowfish from the ocean, you reel it in, and then you cut it up and you eat it, like one does. that wild caught blowfish is poisonous because of something they eat. And farmed fugu, so if you have fugu in a farm and you control exactly what they eat, aquaculture, I think they're not poisonous or not as poisonous or something like that. So I think that most people who die from eating blowfish in Japan have caught a blowfish from the ocean themselves. Like they go out on a little boat and they catch it. I think it's really famous in Japan that if you prepare blowfish for your restaurant, you need a license. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, and it made a lot of sense to me that if you're preparing an item that's potentially fatal, then you should probably have some sort of backing. That's some sort of certification that says that you're probably not going to kill people.
Yeah, I think the liver and the skin is poisonous. Yeah.
But depending on what they eat, it can be less poisonous. Is that the gist?
That's what in my broken Japanese, that's what I understood. That we didn't need to worry because this was farmed aquaculture fugu, but I still had the local hospital on speed dial just in case. No,
not a bad idea. You can never be too careful.
Yeah. I think if you're a Japanese person and you live in Tokyo or you grew up outside of Yamaguchi, I think the thought of having a fugu dinner sounds very expensive and very extreme and kind of a real occasion. You want a real occasion to do that. It's a very special kind of meal. But when I lived in Yamaguchi, we had the fugu dinner in this really old school countryside place where they actually farmed the fugu. So it was attached to an aquaculture farm and they had them living in these pens. And then you could go out and see them. And then you'd go up this flight of stairs and these two older ladies served you fugu in 7 different ways. So they used every part of the fugu.
I was about to ask, what does that mean exactly? What's 7 different ways of having it?
Well, the first thing they serve you is like the most famous, which is the fugu sashimi. So they slice it super thin, and it's like it almost has the texture of like raw chicken. I don't know if you've ever eaten raw chicken in Japan, but it's like very meaty, and they slice it very thin, and it has a very, very firm texture. If you can imagine like the texture of what raw chicken might taste like, that's the texture of it. So it's very firm, very muscular, and sliced paper thin. And then they did karaage, where they deep fried the meat.
Oh.
And then they did a nabe, or a hot pot, where they put pieces of the fugu in and they mixed it up with vegetables. And then after you ate it out of the nabe pot, they took some of those pieces out and then they put it with rice. And then you had a don nabe with rice. And then at the end, they wrapped those with... I forget what it was, but it was something with scallions, and we wrapped it. Maybe it was like tofu skin, and we wrapped it. And it was like all these different preparations of fugu, one after the other. And it was delicious, really good, but it had this mystique to it. It's like,
all right.
Yeah, but I survived.
Clearly.
Yes. Would you, if someone offered you a poisonous fugu dinner, would you do it?
I think that... Wait a minute. You're specifying poisonous fugu. Hang on. I don't know. It's never come up.
If someone offered you a potentially poisonous dinner, I mean, it's not poisonous. They're not going to serve you the poisonous parts, but there's that risk. There's that unknown.
I probably would, because I think that if somebody made it their livelihood that they sold, and prepared this specific dish, they're probably very good at it, and I imagine that they've probably never killed anybody. I imagine that's a big red flag when you're trying to get your license.
Yes.
There was that one incident.
The two little old ladies who were running the fugu restaurant did remind me a little bit of Arsenic and Old Lace. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie.
It's been a while.
It's about the two spinster aunts that kill people and put them in the window seat. But these lovely older ladies at the at the Fugu restaurant were very sweet, and nobody wound up in the window seat. So it was a great experience all around. But it was very different. The Fugu restaurant in rural Yamaguchi at the aquaculture farm was very different from the experience you would have if you paid top dollar in Tokyo or Shinjuku or something like that. So it was great to have the more authentic experience right where the fish was being kept, and really enjoyed it.
Nice. It's pretty great that we're getting to have this chat with you here, having spent time there. Usually when we do this, it's like, we visited, you having had a nice chunk of experience there makes this a little more interesting, I think.
Yeah, it was also in Yamaguchi that I saw my first real live monkey in Japan.
Was he hanging out at the Fugu place?
No, he wasn't.
What's the story?
I think the monkeys are smart enough to avoid the Fugu, but I was riding in a car and we were driving down a mountain pass road in Yamaguchi, and this giant snow monkey ran across the street in front of the car. I mean, far away. We weren't going to hit the monkey, but it was the first time I'd ever seen a wild monkey in Japan, and it freaked me out a little bit. I was like, oh my God, what is that? He's like, oh, it's just a monkey. They're everywhere. And I'm like, what? Monkeys are everywhere. So it was kind of crazy to see my first wild monkey. I saw more monkeys when I lived in Niigata, but you'll never forget your first monkey, John.
Oh, I have yet to encounter monkeys in the wild. So far. Who knows? Maybe, who knows? One day I'll get lucky enough and I'll run across some wild monkeys.
I think the further out into the countryside you go in Japan, the more likely your monkey sighting are going to go up.
I'm not much of a countryside person, regardless of what country I'm in.
Okay.
So, it's a very rare thing for me. I am city folk.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of wonderful breweries in Yamaguchi, and I think the total... Do you want to take a guess? We always do this every time we do a prefecture. Do you want to take a guess the number of breweries in Yamaguchi, roughly?
So when I think Yamaguchi, I think less about quantity and more about quality.
Okay.
So I want to say something like 30.
Oh, there's actually 23.
Oh,
Ish.
Originally I was going to say 20, and I was like, shoot for the moon. I should have stopped earlier. That's pretty good though. Not too bad. 23.
Yeah.
My instinct was right.
Yes. So for comparison, the prefecture with the largest number of breweries is Niigata, around 89 or 90. And Kagoshima, a prefecture we covered recently, only has 2 places producing sake. And Okinawa only has 1. So I think that with 23, you're somewhere in the middle, don't you think?
Yeah.
A little smaller than most, but that's a good number of breweries.
Yeah, I think so. That's not bad. But yeah, 23 and some really great stuff that comes out of there. We mentioned that earlier. Is that Yamaguchi is a place that you can get fantastic sake. Tim, I think that when it comes to regionality and sake and the idea that there is a local style, that sometimes it's something that breweries will get together and do on purpose, and sometimes it's a little more like, well, this is what the water is like and it has an influence, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think there's a regional style for Yamaguchi, or are they just making really good sake?
That's a really good question. I think every prefecture wants to have some type of cohesiveness to their area's sake. Maybe if you asked brewers in Yamaguchi, they may all say, oh, pairs well with fugu. Pairs well with poisonous blowfish.
But what doesn't?
Yeah. I wish I knew more about Yamaguchi sake in general, even though I stayed there for a little bit and I've enjoyed Yamaguchi sake for years. But there is one of our friends who's a true expert, our buddy Jim Ryan. And the news flash is that Jim is actually living in Yamaguchi, a huge devotee of Yamaguchi sake, And he's publishing a book that's coming out in February 2023.
Yeah.
Yeah, that book is going to be called Discovering Yamaguchi Sake, A Taster's Guide to Breweries, Culture, and Terrain.
Yeah, and I think that he's the guy when it comes to Yamaguchi sake. He loves Yamaguchi sake. He's got a lot to say about it. He knows a tremendous amount, and he's just a great resource for that sort of thing. We can literally say he wrote the book on Yamaguchi sake.
So I propose that we invite Jim onto the show and do a Yamaguchi Prefecture Part 2 when the book comes out next year. So we'll definitely invite Jim on the show.
Yeah.
And if you're interested in listening to Jim's thoughts on sake, he also has his own podcast too. So Jim is one of the co-hosts on the Sake Deep Dive podcast for the Beyond Beginners. So if you want to get deep into the weeds and the technicalities of sake, then the podcast that Jim does, it's not dedicated only to Yamaguchi sake, but they are really great to listen to, Andy and Jim. And I think that when this book comes out, that'll give us a perfect reason to revisit Yamaguchi for another Sake Revolution episode.
Sounds like a plan to me. And by virtue of that podcast, though, we still want to get him on the show at some point for that as well. We got a lot of reasons to have Jim on the show soon.
Yes. And if you're interested in Jim's book, Discovering Yamaguchi Sake, it is available for pre-order all over the internet. So we will have a link to that if you want to pre-order in our show notes at sakerevolution.com.
Fantastic. Now, as is customary, we're not just going to sit here and prattle on about sake without having something to taste. So we do have some Yamaguchi sake that we are going to sip and talk about.
Boy, do we ever. We picked a doozy.
We did.
Such a favorite brewery of mine. So, John, do you want to let our listeners know which Yamaguchi sake we'll be tasting for today's episode?
Yes, absolutely. So today we are going to be tasting the Gangi Mizunowa Junmai Ginjo. Now, the brewery here that produces Gangi is Yaoshin Shuzo, and they've only been around since 1922, so they're a spring chicken in the sake world. This sake uses Yamanishiki rice for both components. It is milled down to 50% of its original size. The yeast is Yamaguchi 9H. The sake meter value, that measurement of dry to sweet, is +3. The acidity is 1.6. And the alcohol by volume is 15%.
Yes, so Gangi is a small but really well-regarded brewery located in Iwakuni, Japan. And I had the good fortune to visit Gangi. Mm-hmm. And Iwakuni is really famous as a town because it has this famous bridge. Do you know the...
Yes. The bridge with like 5, I want to say arcs, but those are actually kind of like stairs when you're actually on the bridge. I imagine that the show notes will, of course, have photos of this bridge.
Yeah, the bridge is called the Kintai Bridge, Kintai, Kintai, and it's made out of 5 steep arches. And to go up and over the bridge, you have to go basically upstairs and then downstairs, and upstairs and downstairs. So these big arches that make up this bridge. It's very beautiful, very picturesque over the river. And when I visited the Kintai Bridge, they told me that the bridge was built this way with these huge arches to stop people from crossing the bridge quickly. So it's a defensive bridge.
Oh.
So if you have horses, you have to like walk the horses up the stairs, down the stairs, and you can't rush across this bridge. You have to go very slowly.
Yeah. Whenever I see photos of it, I often wonder like what the hell they were thinking. And
how much sake did they drink? How much sake did they drink before they built this bridge? Yeah, so you could see a photo of that in our show notes. It's very beautiful. And Iwakuni is the town where Gangi is located. And Gangi itself has a meaning that's related to the town and the river that this bridge goes over. And Gangi is the Japanese word for the steps that go into the river from the shore. So maybe you've seen those on some riversides where there's kind of like a stepped down embankment on the side of a river. So if you wanted to, you could like kind of step down and go into the water. So that is what the meaning of Gangi is. It's that stepped embankment on the side of the river.
Oh, very nice, very nice.
And that's somehow how they got their name. And since they were founded in 1922, this is their 100-year anniversary year.
Oh, yeah, it is, isn't it?
Yeah. I just did a little quick math in my head there.
Yeah. Congratulations to Yashin Suzo. 100 years.
Yeah. The brewery, when I visited, it was a relatively small brewery, beautifully maintained, had a lovely, some breweries smaller in scale have this beautiful patina to them. Like they have all the old brewery buildings. And it was very much like that. Just a lovely place to visit. And the staff at Gangi were so welcoming and so kind. And beyond that, I've become a huge fan of their sake because it's so delicious. Spoiler alert. This is an amazing brew that we picked to represent Yamaguchi. So should we pour it and get it in the glass?
Let's.
All right.
Tim, this is one of those where you start pouring it and the aroma is already hitting you.
It has a lovely aroma. Really nice.
It's not overwhelming, but it is so pleasant and it's right away. It is like, hello, how are you? What are you getting on this?
Well, it smells quite fruity. I'm actually noticing a little bit of a pineapple aroma. For me, it's veering towards those very classic tropical fruits, a little papaya, a little pineapple.
Yeah. I understand what you mean about the pineapple, but I'm trying to lean away from it in my mind because when I think pineapple has such a high acidity to it, and I'm not getting that thought when I sniff this. But very nice.
So maybe wafting pineapple from the next room.
From the other room. Yeah.
Someone is chopping pineapple next door.
Yeah, but this is. I think that the papaya is right on.
Yeah.
Sorry, the spot on.
Yeah.
And it's just a really enjoyable aroma that you can just kind of give it a little swirl, give it a sniff, give it a little swirl, give it a sniff. And it's really nice.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't say this very often on the show, but in addition to being fruity in that tropical fruit kind of way, I also smell floral components here. And if you think about lilac or white flower, I get a little bit of that perfumed floral note. And
a little bit.
It's very subtle, but really lovely. And I think brings dimension to the overall aroma. Like if you listen to us and you don't like papaya and you don't like pineapple, you're like, oh, maybe this sake is not for me. But it's more nuanced than that. There's layers there, and it's really just really good.
This is we are using fruity words here, but this is not a fruit bomb by any stretch.
No, it's very soft, restrained, but clearly fruit driven, fruit and floral for me.
Yeah, very nice. Are you ready for a sip?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Now, we often say, oh, it tastes different than it smelled or different from the aroma. This tastes very similar to the aroma for me. Fruity. It feels like somebody dripped a little pineapple juice in my sake.
A little bit.
A little bit, right?
Yeah.
In the best possible way.
There's the aroma that we described. It feels to me like this taste is making good on that, right? The aroma is making a promise, and this is keeping it. There's harmony to it, and I I love it. It's really nice the way they come together and they complement one another in a great way. It is very tasty. I get a little bit more of that floral experience now that I'm sipping on it, though.
Yeah, and there's also like aromas that we perceive after we sip on something. So we also get some of those aromas through the back of our palate and up to our retronasal cavity. And so you can perceive additional aromas after you've sipped the sake as well.
Totally.
What do you think about the texture of this Gangi Junmai Ginjo?
It's a little, how do I put this? The texture is somewhat kind of light and a little bit silky, but there is a certain amount of cloying, and not in a negative way, of course, but the taste does hang around and builds as you sip on it more. But when I'm kind of moving it around in my mouth, it's coating a little bit, but it's also a little bit light in texture, I feel. But yeah, that's my thought on that. Like flavor wise, I really do think it like builds up and kind of keeps going, but it is a bit light in texture.
Yeah, I think that for me, the texture is medium plus. It's a little bit beyond medium for me. It's not, I wouldn't describe it as rich or too coating on the palate, but it's medium plus. And as far as sweet to dry goes, this is a +3 on the SMV scale. And I find that all this tropical fruit is leading me more to perceive this as a little sweeter than it might be otherwise. And the finish is not crisp and dry and falling off a cliff. This lingers on your palate and really gives it even more an impression of richness because of that kind of lingering finish. This is a sake you can sip and then continue to enjoy the aroma, enjoy the taste, but all the while, it's not overwhelming or too in your face or too heavy. They've just managed to strike this perfect balance, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that you nailed it.
Yeah, and we joke sometimes about the John Puma sitting on the couch, relaxing after work sake.
Yeah.
And I think this should go in the Hall of Fame for that. Don't you think?
Yes. I've had bottles of this at home before, and they never last very long. Like and they do tend to disappear kind of quick around these parts. It is such a pleasant sipping experience. It is,
yes.
It's one of those doesn't need food, in my opinion. Like this is such a great sipping sake.
Yes. And, it's interesting. I find that some of those sakes that are so sippable that you just keep drinking without thinking about it, sometimes they're a little bit on the light side. And this has a little bit more weight to it.
A little bit.
It has a great balance, but it demands your attention a little bit. But just to be like, look at the glass and be like, oh my God, this is good. Like this is, if you gave this to your friends who don't know anything about sake, I think their jaws are going to hit the floor.
Tim, that is a fantastic point. This is a phenomenal introduction sake.
Yes.
This is such a great sake to put in front of someone who has minimal or no experience with sake. This is, I think you're absolutely right. And this is going to blow somebody's mind if they have this. If this is the first sake they've ever had before, they're going to just be like, I had no idea that this is what I was getting into. Like, this is a fantastic introductory sake.
Yeah. So if you have friends out there that are sake deprived or have never had sake before, God forbid.
And honestly, if you're their friend and you haven't gone and introduced them to sake yet, what are you doing? You're a bad friend. You're going to go and introduce them to sake. But here we go. We found a good one. This would be a wonderful entry point, I think, into the world of sake.
And John, I just did something I never do. I just poured myself a little bit more during our tasting on the show.
You never, ever do that. You are always so controlled and reserved about how much you consume while we're recording. And I'm like, see, because you're kind of doing it under the folks. I can't see
screen,
the entirety of Tim when he's doing this.
Yes,
and
just
I
from the shoulders up, but
his shoulder came up. I was like, "What's he doing over there?" And yeah, is pouring more sake.
I poured myself another sip of the Gangi Mizunowa. It's just so good, so good.
It is. It is. It kind of, for me, it kind of goes into that magic water kind of category for me. So good.
You stealing my trademarked phrases there, Puma?
I was crediting you. I thought I should have said your magic water. I'm sorry.
You'll hear from my lawyers.
That is a Tim Sullivan special, or the magic water. Oh, this is so good.
Yeah, this is really good. So I think that we can highly recommend the Gangi brand to anyone who wants to start exploring the delicious sakes of Yamaguchi.
Yeah, and I think we obviously we mentioned this earlier, and this is something that we don't often do. I don't think we've ever done this on one of our Prefecture episodes, but we will be back.
Yes, we're gonna have a part 2.
We are going to return to this topic, to this Prefecture, and we're going to bring help.
Yes. So we featured a few other authors on the podcast, and we really hope that when Jim's book comes out next year, that he'll be kind enough to join us, and we'll feature another one of the 23 breweries from Yamaguchi.
Sounds good to me.
And I don't think we'll have a better guide than Jim. He's devoted so much attention and time to writing this book, so I think it's going to be fabulous when it comes out. I'm really looking forward to reading it.
Great. I am really looking forward to having him on the show.
All right. Well, we had a little visit to Yamaguchi, our first step. We'll be back with another episode next year to explore more of Yamaguchi, but to dip our toe into the fabulous sakes of this great prefecture and to learn a little bit about the dangerous, life-threatening food you can eat there. Question mark.
So I guess does this then pair with that? No, I don't know.
I think this would pair fabulously with fugu. So maybe what I said before was right.
Oh, well, there you go.
Maybe
now, which of the 7 preparation styles would it pair best with? I think that's one that when you prepare it 7 different ways, it's easy to find one that's going to work with the sake.
Yes. That's so true. I'm thinking fondly back to that fugu tempura. The deep fried fugu was really good. Fugu has a chicken-like texture, so that deep fried fugu was just out of this world. It was so good.
Sounds good.
Well, John, it was great to taste with you. Thanks for taking this little visit to Yamaguchi with me, and I want to thank all our listeners for tuning in again this week. A special hello and a special thank you to all of our patrons. We love our community on Patreon, and if you would like to support the Sake Revolution podcast, please visit patreon.com/Sake Revolution to learn more.
And Tim, did you know that at sakerevolution.com you can also find an assortment of merch, swag?
The holidays are coming up.
The holidays are coming, and there's shirts there. There's going to be more shirts there. Probably there are stickers there. There's probably going to be more stickers there. Do you think we need to do a winter hat? Winter is coming, and so it makes me wonder if that might be the move. Is that perhaps we need some kind of a hat? Maybe you guys and gals out there need to let us know what you'd like to see a Sake Revolution logo on. You can get us at feedback@sakerevolution.com.
And if you would like to read our show notes or to see a written transcript of this episode, as always, please visit sakerevolution.com, and we'll have all the information devoted to this episode. And again, that written transcript for you.
And pictures of bridges and blowfish. Do you have pictures of the blowfish?
I sure do.
All right. We got pictures of blowfish too. Anyway. So everybody at home and wherever you happen to be listening to our show, please raise a glass. Remember to keep drinking sake and kanpai.